Winter is here in Pittsburgh, and it showed on Tuesday night when the Penguins were absolutely buried by an Avalanche. Hunter and I are going to break down that game and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social medias at synonym for wet. Joined as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow his Twitter account at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Plus, if you're following us on YouTube, don't forget to hit the notification button. That way, you'll be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we dive in today, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, it was not a good night for the Pittsburgh Penguins on Tuesday when they took on the Colorado Avalanche, losing 6-2. And it was, I said this to you, Hunter, during the game itself. It was a weird game, all things considered, because on the whole, I did not hate the way the Penguins were playing. I think this was a case of them playing a team that has a much more potent top six than they do. And it's just all in all a better team than the Penguins are. But the game from the get-go was just disjointed. For the most part, neither team really got a whole lot going. It was a very up and down kind of slog of a game, which you wouldn't expect to say about a Colorado Avalanche game, because that team is the spiritual sibling of the 2010s Penguins with the way they play, the amount of skill they have, the speed they play with. If you're a Penguins fan, I'm sure you're watching the Colorado Avalanche and thinking this is reminiscent of the 2010s. But really, to sum this game up, the Penguins let happen exactly what you and I said on Tuesday that they should not let happen. Nathan MacKinnon, 5 points, goal, 4 assists. Mikko Rantanen gets a hat trick, and Tristan Jarry with a very poor start, his first in about a month, and just everything that could go wrong for the Penguins in that regard went wrong for the Penguins on Tuesday night.
They were badly outclassed by the Avs top line and Cale Makar on the ice at the same time. That was the biggest difference in this game. The Avs' biggest star players really showed up in this one and outperformed the Penguins' biggest star players. I didn't hate the rest of the Penguins game outside of the Avs star players being on the ice. It's just that when they got on the ice, they were toyed with, legitimately. The Penguins players, when they were on the ice against Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon, and Devon Toews, those four players, they toyed with whatever line Mike Sullivan was putting out there, whether it's the Crosby line, Gino line, etc. They were getting destroyed. And you saw it. I mean, there was that pass from Makar to Rantanen for one of his goals where he deked Jarry out of his socks. And I was like, you can't do anything to stop that pass. Cale Makar is just that good. He's the best defenseman on the planet for a reason. He's going to make everyone in this league look silly. He did exactly that there. And then Rantanen did the rest with that insane deke. And literally, I'm just watching the game and I'm like, there's no defending that. I don't think any player in this league can defend what just happened there. Again, it's their star players playing like dogs, and that you saw that throughout this night. Sure, there was some instances, where the Penguins really didn't play that well in their own zone. For example, you have a really ill-advised pinch from Matt Grzelcyk. I know, shocker, water's wet. Leads to a 2-on-1. Nick MacKinnon buries one past Tristan Jarry. Yeah, you probably want to save there, but I'm also thinking for Matt Grzelcyk, Why are you pinching there when you know Nathan MacKinnon is going for that loose puck? He's going to beat you to that loose puck 10 out of 10 times. Going for a pinch there makes no sense. It goes back to something that we also said during the Tuesday episode, man. You got to play simple against a team like Colorado. If you're too aggressive against them, they're going to make you pay. You saw exactly that, especially on that goal from MacKinnon. Also, you mentioned Tristan Jarry. Yeah, he was bad in this game, right around an 800 save percentage. The third goal was really the one that still stands out to me as one he's got to have. I felt like he was moving side to side way too slow in this game. He also just can't be leaky there with that goal. That's from an area where you should be able to make a save. You need to be able to bail your team out there, and he wasn't able to because the Penguins, they got back in that game, late in the second period. Heck, if he didn't allow that third goal, that game was tied heading into the third period, and who knows how that game ended. But the Penguins were at least getting back into that game by the end of the second period. They just weren't able to sustain it in the third because the Avalanche, again, their top players were just absolutely blitzing them. And then, Valerie Nichushkin joins the party, and he turned Marcus Pettersson into a pylon on that play. I mean, that's just someone saying, you know what, I'm him. I'm going to go right around you. And there's nothing you can do about it. Marcus Pettersson, usually by far this team's best defensive defenseman. We all know it's been a bit of a struggle for him this year. He got walked on that play. That was really sad to watch considering how consistent he usually is for this team. But again, I go back to saying it. Avs top players, they won them this game.
They absolutely did. And you hit on it with the Matt Grzelcyk pinch. And again, it's not to pile on Grzelcyk. We know that he has been extremely subpar this season, but that really is indicative of what we said about Colorado, where you have no margin for error against them. I even said this to you last night. You got out of that first period and it's 2-0 Colorado, but it didn't feel like an insurmountable 2-0 lead. It didn't feel like Colorado carried the play and Colorado was dominating the game. Yeah, their top players were, but we expected that. We absolutely, those guys are playing on a plane by themselves this season. They are that good. But you looked at the rest of the game. Like I said, it was a little disjointed. The Penguins had their opportunities. They just didn't capitalize on them. And even when it was 3-0, again, bad goal for Jarry to let up. But then I was still watching it and thinking, man, they're a shot or two away from getting right back into this thing just because there was very little sustained pressure by Colorado. It was a lot of one shot, one goal chances by those top players. And sure enough, Cody Glass scores a great goal with some great puck movement from Letang and Malkin. And then Michael Bunting, who I want to touch on real quick, scores another one after what was a crazy sequence in power plays and penalties. But you looked at that game and thought, this isn't a dominating performance by Colorado, and it's bared out in the analytics at 5-on-5. The Penguins had 58% of the shot attempts. They had 9 high danger chances to Colorado's 5. They had 55% of the expected goals throughout the game. So the Penguins played fairly well. They just got outclassed by the other team's superstars. And you couple that with a bad game from Tristan Jarry, and you get, we'll say 5-2, since they did get an empty net goal result out of this game. But for Michael Bunting, if I can touch on a positive, and this is a bit of foreshadowing for our second segment, I really liked his game last night. I have liked his game for the past couple of weeks. This is the Michael Bunting that the Penguins need. He's playing like a rat. He's getting under other teams' skins. And even more so than that, he's living in the blue paint. We have seen him around the net consistently for the past couple of weeks. And most importantly, the thing that he brought to the Penguins last year when he came over in the Gensel trade was that he was playing at 1,000,000 miles an hour at all times. He's involved in the play. He's creating chaos. He's creating chances. He's playing physical. And we saw all of that from him last night. And we have been seeing this from him the past few games. And while it's not going to solve all of the issues the Penguins have, it will certainly help them moving forward if he plays that kind of game.
Yeah, he was all over the ice last night. He was also, of course, great against the Leafs this past weekend. This is closer to the level that we saw from Bunting at the end of last season, where the Penguins were trying to go on that late season run and almost snuck into the playoffs again. Remember, it came down to literally the final day of the regular season. We're starting to see him get closer to that. You saw him really get into it with Devon Taves last night too. And by the way, that was a Tim Stützle level dive from Devon Taves. You even saw Bunting do the diving motion. I only wanted him to do the Jim Montgomery motion. Do you remember him when he was the head coach of the Bruins and he literally just was on the bench just doing it 5 million times in a row? I still laugh every time I see a replay of it. I just wanted him to do that because that was a textbook dive. Should have been called, but I guess NHL officials just don't want to call it. I don't really want to complain too much about officiating during this episode, but I will say last night really wasn't that good either. But again, it's also kind of par for the course at this point when it comes to NHL officiating. But, he was great. I think the biggest thing for me also for last night, I still don't think the Penguins generated enough. In the back half of the first period, they really weren't living too much in the offensive zone. The Colorado Avalanche were doing a great job defensively by, just kind of being pains, especially in the neutral zone, just clogging things up. You saw that throughout the second and the third periods. You look at some of the more of the underlying numbers. The Penguins only generated 1.43 expected goals at 5-on-5. Yeah, I know they had 2 goals last night, but still, that's not good enough. I want them to generate a bit more, especially when you're going up against a potent team like Colorado who have some of the best players on the planet. So if there's another critique I have, it's that they didn't generate enough. They didn't spend enough time in the offensive zone. They didn't forecheck enough. I need to see that a bit more as well.
Yeah, agreed. And the Penguins will have a chance to get back into the win column tomorrow on Thursday when they travel to Montreal for a short 2-game road trip that'll take them to Montreal on Thursday night and then Ottawa on Saturday. We'll obviously have a new episode for you on Thursday where we get you set for that game. But that is going to do it for our recap of the Colorado game from Tuesday night. When we come back, it's Wednesday. That means it's time for Hunter and I to give out our MVP of the week, also known as Warrior Helmet Wednesday. But before we do that, we've got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks, and if you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. And here is why you need to get started today. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. Prize Picks offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select players are discounted up to 25%. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking especially at the Pittsburgh Penguins as they head to take on teams like Montreal and Ottawa, where they should do a little bit of feasting. So I'm looking at the obvious of Sidney Crosby, Chris Letang, and Evgeny Malkin. And of course, I might also take a look at Michael Bunting, who's been heating up recently. So we will check that out. And you can have fun with your friends while potentially cashing out fast. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, back here for the second segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And we're switching up the format a little bit today because we have a really fun segment to end the show today. The diehards will know what today was 24 years ago, but if you don't, stay tuned. We'll get to it. Before we go to that, though, it is Warrior Helmet Wednesday. For our newer listeners, just to give you a quick rundown of that, we're paying homage to the 2016 Stanley Cup winning Penguins. When they had their locker room team MVP, they gave out a Warrior helmet. So each Wednesday, Hunter and I give out our Warrior helmet, which is the MVP for the previous week for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I will kick us off, Hunter. It's a guy that I have been talking about for this episode. I even brought him up in the Prize Picks ad. I got to give it to Michael Bunting. 2 goals in 3 games, 3 points in 3 games. He's starting to look a lot more like the player he was when the Penguins acquired him in the Jake Gensel deal. I've liked his game quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. I think between scoring a huge goal against the Leafs and then another huge goal last night against Colorado, I think he's starting to round into form, and I thought he had a very good week. So for me, my weekly MVP for, I believe, let me check my notes. This is the 8th week of Warrior Helmet Wednesday. So week 8, I give it to Michael Bunting.
I was considering him. I was also considering Erik Karlsson, who, by the way, that no-look pass to Michael Bunting last night was disgusting. Probably only 5 other defensemen in this league can make that pass. It was truly a thing of beauty. Karlsson has had a really strong last week. He's honestly had a really strong last couple of weeks, if we're being real here. He's playing some really good hockey. But for me, I'm going with Blake Lizotte for this last week. 2 goals in his last 3 games. No, he's not going to keep shooting at this outrageous pace that you've seen him shoot at to start this season, but he has been all over the ice for this team. He's had a couple of wicked snipes, especially against the Rangers last week. That was one heck of a shot past Igor Shesterkin, and he's also been great defensively in his own zone. He basically killed off that entire 6-on-4/6-on-5 against the Leafs over the weekend. He was a menace. I wore the Brandon Tanev shirt from Pittsburgh Clothing Company to start the episodes this week. He very much reminds me of him just with the way he plays. He's physical. He's everything part of this bottom 6 has needed and so much more these last couple of years. I'm giving mine to Lizotte, and I really hope that he continues his strong play. So he gets my helmet for this week.
Yeah, I've loved his game as well. We have lauded about him for the past couple weeks, especially since getting healthy. Really liked his game. We've even advocated that even though we still expect this team to be sellers at the trade deadline, that's someone I would like to hold on to, and I think could be part of a longer-term solution here in Pittsburgh, because I don't see him commanding any sort of gigantic pay raise. Plus, the value he brings has less to do with production and statistics, more so to do with the energy he brings and the type of game he plays. You see that on so many contending teams. One last thing that I want to do, since I said I'm going to check my notes, just an update for fun's sake on Warrior Helmet Wednesday after 8 weeks. Who are our leaders in the clubhouse who have racked up the most MVPs so far this season? And we have a 3-way tie with 3 players who have each gotten the Warrior helmet twice so far this season. An obvious one, the captain, Sidney Crosby. He has continued to be one of the better players, even though he is kind of having a little bit of a down stretch here, but overall a pretty solid season from him. The other with 2 is the guy who we say embodies the heart and soul of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is Bryan Rust. And the other one who comes in third with 2 Warrior helmets, both were awarded by myself. So the meme continues. I believe he's becoming this year's Jeff Carter, and that is one Jesse Puljujarvi. So those guys have gotten 3 Warrior helmet awards from us so far this year. And we will continue to do this segment throughout the season. It's a lot of fun. And of course, we love hearing from you guys about who you think your MVP of the week is, because we're pretty grateful to have a very engaged audience that deals with us. And Hunter, anything you want to add before we take a little trip down memory lane to close out the show?
Honestly, not really. I'm glad that there's a cool little tie there for the most Warrior helmets. I'm curious to see who wins this at the end of the year. If I had to guess, I know this is going to be so generic. It's probably going to be Crosby, because I know he's going to go on at least a few more heaters before we get to April. You're not going to keep him quiet, or I guess, him having a couple of down weeks forever. That's just not how, we've grown accustomed to Sidney Crosby. Yes, we know he's 37, but I think he's probably going to win this by the end of the season. But, I also wouldn't sleep on Gino. I could see him also getting a couple of big hot stretches going here.
Yeah, I think those are 2 pretty obvious answers, but I think the dark horse in the clubhouse is one of the people who is tied after 8 weeks, and that's Bryan Rust, man, because they don't call him Big Game Brian for nothing. He steps up when it matters. He has been an absolute gem for the Penguins since he came up all those years ago. But I think that is going to do it for our second segment. As I said, when we come back, we are going to take a quick trip down memory lane in one of the most momentous occasions in the history of the Pittsburgh Penguins that happened 24 years ago today. Holy crap, we're getting old. But if you don't know what it is, stay tuned and we will dive into it when we come back. But before we do, we got our last sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $100 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, say you're watching Steelers-Eagles this coming Sunday, and you get one of those hunches, you can do so in the same place where you place your bets, and you'll get to view live stats, live play-by-play, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And there are often questions asked in sports and in life in general of where were you when? And on December 11th, 2000, it is a day that Penguins fans will remember exactly where they were when then owner Mario Lemieux stepped to the microphone and announced that he was coming back to play hockey just about 3 years after he announced his initial retirement, shocking the hockey world. And there is a great retrospective on it on The Athletic. Rob Rossi linked to it today in his Penguins Today blog. So go give that a read over. It is one of the biggest days in not just Penguins history, but NHL history, because Mario Lemieux, even when he retired, was still one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player on the planet. And through all the hell that he went through, beating cancer, back surgeries, injuries, everything else, he was still one of the best players you had ever seen. So his retirement, while not totally unexpected, it still was a bit of a shock. I will openly admit on this show that when he retired, I was about 7 years old. And I remember sitting in my living room in Penn Hills and crying because the guy that got me into hockey and made me love the Penguins was hanging up the skates. I wasn't going to get to watch him ever again. And it was a sad day. And then December 11th, 2000, just shocking everybody. And the best story from it, it's both sort of cited in the Athletic piece, but it's also a huge part of the Penguins' 50th anniversary documentary, is the godfather of Pittsburgh sports, Stan Savern. May he rest in peace. One of the greatest to ever do it. But he gets a tip from his partner then, Guy Junker, who says, Mario Lemieux and Jay Caulfield are skating in secret at Neville Island. No one knows. So they go check it out. Savern tells his cameraman, hang back. I don't want to scare him. I don't want to upset him. I'm going to walk up to the sort of outdoor rink at Neville Island. And as soon as Savern comes within eye shot of the glass, Lemieux looks at him and goes, what are you doing here? And by this point, he's already told the Penguins he's coming back. He hasn't made an official announcement, but he's told all the people in his circle that he's coming back. So they go get shots of him working out with Jay Caulfield. They don't interview Lemieux. And then all of the chaos starts. There's rumors, there's radio segments, there's TV segments. And then next thing you know, on December 11th, he comes back and says, I'm coming back. And they ask him why. And he says, because I want my son, Austin, to see his dad play hockey.
And he was fantastic when he came back a couple of weeks later. I mean, his first game back, Pat, 3-point night. It's like, oh, ho-hum, Mario's back. And he ended up having a great season that year, too. Only in 43 games, he had 35 goals and 76 points. And it's just like, good Lord, man. Like, he continued to show why he is arguably the greatest hockey player this world has ever seen. I will die on the hill that he is the greatest hockey player in this league's history. Yeah, I know we could get some Oiler fans somehow coming in here and saying like, oh, you guys are just Penguin homers, whatever. You know what? I don't care. I think had Mario had a fully healthy career, he would have broken every single one of Wayne Gretzky's records. Yeah, I understand some people, especially out in Western Canada, will think I'm crazy for saying that. Sorry, that's how I feel. He was that talented with the puck on his stick, and he ended up playing a few great years, and then just seeing him also play that final year. I know it was only 26 games, Pat, but seeing him play with Sidney Crosby on the same ice. I mean, I was only, 7, 8 years old at that time, but I still vividly remember that. And it was obviously my mom, she grew up with Mario and Yager and Paul Coffey and Ron Francis and all those guys. So, she was obviously having the time of her life watching all her heroes, but I was also having the time of my life watching, my new heroes, with Crosby, especially starting out, and seeing how Mario took Crosby under his wing. It was fantastic. And I know, again, he only played in 26 games that season. He still had 22 points there, by the way. But seeing those two on the ice at the same time, I'll never forget that. And just what a career. Again, in my opinion, the best hockey player this world has ever seen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I look at it as a matter of health and then a matter of game comparison.
Yeah.
Mario, I almost said Sidney Crosby. Whoops. Nope, not Sidney Crosby. Mario Lemieux. Well, how lucky are we? We've got those two generational talents in our city. But Lemieux played a better game than Wayne Gretzky. And I do not mean that as an insult to Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky did things that were unbelievable and seemingly impossible. And he did it as a smaller player. He was much more of a finesse and speed guy. Lemieux had the speed, Lemieux had the size, and Lemieux had the hands. That was the biggest thing that people, I think, frequently forget about Mario Lemieux, is that for a guy that size to have those soft of hands in that era of hockey was unseen before. The fact that he could beat you by going 1,000,000 miles an hour, but then he could slow the game down and just deke around all five guys on the ice. I mean, I believe it's either the 91 or the 92 Stanley Cup. I know I was barely alive for it, so excuse me for not remembering the exact cup run, but he chases down Ray Bourque from behind with the puck, puts the puck between his legs, goes in on the Bruins goalie, and just shelves one. And it's an unbelievable goal. And then you remember, he does that not to some pylon, not to some sixth defenseman. He does it to Ray Bourque.
Yes.
One of the best defensemen to ever play the game. And he makes him look like an absolute cone. It was incredible. And just to put a fine point on it, the most interesting part of his comeback has nothing to do with the play on the ice, the media attention, or anything like that. It's the fact that he is now the owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's not just coming out of retirement to go play for the Penguins. He's coming out of retirement to play for the team that he owns. And he has to clear it with the NHL. He has to clear it with the NHLPA. He has to figure out what he's going to get paid. So he's got to pay himself. And it's just one of the funniest things. And there's a little anecdote that I will steal from the Athletic article. He ends his call with Gary Bettman with a simple sentence. Gary, I can't trade myself.
It's too good, man. Like, truly, it was such a great comeback. He played so well after coming back too, especially in that first game. He was great in those seasons after. And I just felt so lucky that I at least got to watch him for a little bit. Because again, I was only a little kid at that time. I wasn't born in the, early 90s or, the late 80s or even the early 80s to get to see Mario's prime. I wish I was, because I probably would have, countless, and I mean countless stories. Obviously, I've seen, all the old games. I've watched all the film and all that just to familiarize myself with everything. But I'm still so lucky that I at least got to watch him for a little bit. Even though it was at the tail end of his career, I'm still so thankful that I at least got to watch him, make people look like absolute pylons on the ice on a nightly basis. And just, again, makes me wish that I got to see his entire prime so he could do that to, again, even more on a nightly basis. He was such a treat to watch. And then seeing him in the owner's box for all those years after retiring for the final time, seeing him watch every game up there with his wife and kids, I'll never get over that either. I know he hasn't been around as much these last few years. I hope that changes pretty soon, but it's still such a remarkable story. And again, man, he was a magician with the puck on his stick, the way he was able to outthink so many players on the ice. When he had the puck, he was basically just saying, I'm better than you, and I'm going to put you on a highlight reel. I'm going to put you in my next video that I can somehow release out there. That's how at least it felt like when I was watching him. Like, he's almost like a content creator, and he's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to put you in my next video that's eventually going to be posted to YouTube. And yeah, like that's how it felt like watching him as a little kid, man. He was just fantastic.
And of course, when we saw him all those years in the owner's box, he always had his favorite accessory, big old glass of wine. But
absolutely,
that is going to do it for the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. We will be back with a fresh episode in your podcast feeds on Thursday and get you set for the game against Les Habitants in Montreal. But for now, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Thursday.